"You're just an old woman who shouldn't even be here," Victoria hissed as she passed by, her words landing like icy pebbles against my chest. I froze for a moment, the soft clink of champagne glasses echoing in the background, the floral arrangements swaying gently in the late afternoon sunlight, and I chose not to respond. My hands remained clasped in front of me, adjusting the pale lavender shawl I had draped over my shoulders, smoothing it down with calm, deliberate motions. I could feel the warmth of the room, the soft hum of conversations, laughter that felt just out of reach, and yet there was a hollow space around me that seemed to absorb all light, all joy, leaving only a strange, quiet tension. I walked slowly toward my seat, noting the polished wood of the banquet tables, the gleam of crystal centerpieces catching the sunlight streaming through the windows, the subtle fragrance of roses mingling with vanilla from the candles. My granddaughter, Emily, floated past me in her ivory gown, radiant and oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around her, and I smiled faintly at her, letting the glow of her happiness anchor me amidst the storm. Victoria's eyes flicked toward me again, sharp, calculating, and I noticed a subtle twitch in her lips, a micro-expression that hinted at her own awareness that the moment carried weight beyond the casual insults she threw. I remembered all the times I had prepared for these family gatherings, the hours spent arranging flowers just so, ensuring every napkin was folded perfectly, the little touches that no one else seemed to notice but that mattered to me deeply, a silent ritual of care I had maintained for decades. The laughter of guests reached me, and I let it wash over me, observing without judgment, cataloging each glance, each smirk, each subtle tilt of the head, every gesture that spoke volumes in the spaces between words. I caught a fleeting moment where Victoria whispered to one of the bridesmaids, her tone laced with amusement, the phrase, "She doesn't even belong here," floating to me with the clarity of glass, and I let it settle, acknowledging the sting without letting it shape me. I seated myself with deliberate grace, the chair squeaking faintly under my weight, and looked out across the hall, where the sunlight touched the corners of the room, painting patterns on the floor that reminded me of all the weddings, the birthdays, the quiet moments I had once thought would last forever. And then, as I arranged my clutch neatly on my lap, I felt the envelope tucked into my coat pocket, its presence a small but potent signal that the game had shifted, that the quiet patience I had maintained for so long was about to meet opportunity. Victoria turned away, laughing at something small, unknowing, unprepared, and I leaned back slightly, letting my eyes follow her movements, my mind cataloging possibilities, each step, each gesture, each moment a clue. There was no rush, no overt display, only the patient, steady awareness of someone who had watched, waited, and finally, perhaps, was ready to reveal a truth that had been hidden too long, leaving the room in a delicate suspension of tension, a breath held, waiting for the next move. I sipped my sparkling water slowly, letting the soft hum of conversation fill the space around me while my mind cataloged every nuance, every slight shift in posture, every smile that felt a touch too forced. The sunlight poured through the large windows, creating patterns on the polished oak floor, and I focused on the way the light hit the edges of the centerpieces, the way it caught in the folds of my dress. I noticed the laughter of the younger guests, high-pitched and full of energy, and contrasted it with the quiet tension that seemed to hover just above my table, an invisible layer that no one acknowledged. My hands rested on the tablecloth, fingers tracing the delicate embroidery as I observed the small interactions, a whispered comment here, a shared glance there, subtle signals that spoke volumes if one knew how to read them. I remembered arranging this same hall for countless family events, the hours spent choosing the exact flowers, lining up every chair just so, ensuring that every detail conveyed warmth and care, and the realization settled in that this care had gone unnoticed, unappreciated, almost invisible to those I had labored for. The weight of familiarity and routine pressed against me gently, a reminder of the patience that had carried me through decades, yet mingled now with the discomfort of subtle humiliation. I watched Victoria pass by, her expression composed but sharp, eyes scanning, perhaps sensing my awareness without understanding the depth of it. She laughed lightly at something, a sound that grated against the calm I had cultivated, and I felt a small thrill at my ability to remain unshaken, to witness without interruption, to measure and remember. The dessert table gleamed under the soft lights, and I traced my gaze along the silver trays, noting the meticulous arrangement, the care and presentation that no one else seemed to acknowledge. I reflected on the years of quiet service, the countless hours spent smoothing over disagreements, coordinating celebrations, providing a foundation that allowed others to shine while I remained in the background, and the tension of this moment illuminated the contrast between past devotion and present disregard. Each passing conversation, each subtle gesture, built a mosaic in my mind, connecting the dots between intent and consequence, revealing patterns I had sensed but had not fully acknowledged. The music swelled briefly, a familiar melody that once evoked joy, now layered with a bittersweet resonance, as if the hall itself understood the unspoken dynamics at play. I straightened my posture slightly, taking in the scope of the room, the mingling of guests, the light, the textures, the movement, all cataloged meticulously in my mind, and with a quiet, internal nod, I prepared for the subtle, deliberate steps I would take next, aware that patience, observation, and timing would carry more power than any overt display could ever achieve, leaving the scene charged with potential and silent anticipation. I noticed a subtle shift in the room as the evening progressed, the chatter softening around the edges as if the space itself sensed the tension I carried quietly. The tablecloth shimmered under the soft glow of overhead lights, and the silverware reflected patterns that I traced with my eyes, each glint a marker of attention, focus, and observation. I held my posture steady, shoulders back, head lifted, my hands resting lightly on the edge of the table, absorbing every movement, every glance, every word spoken that carried hidden meaning. Victoria moved through the crowd with her customary charm, the practiced ease of someone confident in control, unaware that my attention followed every step, cataloging the nuances she assumed were invisible. I remembered the many family gatherings I had prepared, the attention to detail that went unnoticed by those who took it for granted, and I felt the quiet power of accumulated knowledge, the awareness of patterns that only time and patience reveal. A guest laughed nearby, a high, airy sound that contrasted with the weight in my chest, and I allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to form, the kind that hides understanding and intent behind calm restraint. The aroma of roses and fresh linens filled the air, mingling with the soft notes of a piano playing in the corner, and I let it ground me, keeping my senses alert to the undercurrents around me. A brief exchange between Victoria and another bridesmaid caught my attention, a whispered comment, the slight lift of an eyebrow, and I noted it without reaction, internalizing the meaning, adding to the mosaic of behavior that formed the truth I had been piecing together. I adjusted my shawl slightly, feeling the smooth fabric against my hands, and let the motion reinforce my calm presence, a silent assertion that I belonged here just as much as anyone else. My eyes scanned the room again, taking in the arrangement of chairs, the placement of guests, the way the light fell across the polished floor, the way each reflection hinted at interactions unseen, and I cataloged each detail for the next steps I would take. Time seemed to stretch, moments elongating, allowing me to observe without interruption, to witness without need for immediate action, to gather insight while maintaining composure. I traced the rim of my glass with my finger, listening to the faint clink, letting it mark the rhythm of the unfolding scene. Each passing minute reinforced a growing clarity, a recognition that patience, perception, and quiet observation were my allies in navigating the delicate web of relationships that surrounded me. I remained seated, serene in appearance, yet fully engaged, every sense attuned, every thought cataloged, ready for the moment when subtle awareness would transform into deliberate, measured action, holding the room suspended between its surface gaiety and the truths only I could perceive. I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting my eyes sweep across the room one more time, noticing the subtle tensions, the shifting expressions, the half-smiles that carried more intent than words could ever convey. The golden light from the chandeliers reflected off the polished silverware, casting fleeting shadows that danced across the tablecloth, and I traced each pattern with quiet attention, as if the room itself were speaking in a language only patience could decipher. Memories of past gatherings rose unbidden, the laughter of children, the clinking of glasses, the smell of fresh flowers and home-baked pies, all creating a tapestry of care and attention that I had once poured into every detail, often unnoticed, often taken for granted. Victoria moved past again, her laughter lighter now, mingling with a few friends, and I noted the subtle arch of her brow, the micro-expression of pride, and the fleeting glance she cast in my direction. I did not flinch, did not respond, only allowed the observation to settle, cataloging each gesture, each nuance, each moment of assumed control that she believed was hers alone. The soft murmur of conversations around the room created a backdrop that seemed to stretch time, allowing me to sit in the middle of it all, simultaneously present and removed, the calm center amidst the currents of ambition and display. I felt the texture of the napkin beneath my fingertips, smooth and cool, grounding me in the present while my mind reconstructed the threads of behavior, connecting them into a clear picture of intentions and outcomes. A distant note from the piano swelled slightly, and I allowed it to pass through me, a reminder of how music and light, laughter and gestures could all carry hidden messages when one chose to observe. Closely, I straightened my posture deliberately, the weight of my experience lending quiet authority to the small, measured movements of my hands and shoulders, a presence that was noticed without comment, understood without acknowledgement. Every glance, every tilt of a head, every whisper that brushed past me became a data point, each one feeding the internal narrative I built with patience, calm, and precision. I allowed a small, knowing smile to play at the corners of my mouth, invisible to most but unmistakable to the careful observer, signaling that I had seen, understood, and remembered. The hall seemed to stretch around me, the light, the shadows, the patterns of movement and speech, all aligning with the slow, deliberate rhythm I had established, a rhythm that would carry the truth forward when the right moment arrived. My thoughts turned to the envelope still tucked safely, the contents untouched but potent, a silent promise that awareness and observation could yield a reckoning without need for overt confrontation, leaving the evening suspended, charged with anticipation, each moment building toward a revelation yet unseen but deeply sensed by all who moved unaware within the space. I watched Victoria move through the room, her expression carefully constructed, her laughter a soft, controlled sound meant to charm and distract, and I allowed myself a slow, deliberate observation of each subtle motion. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught in the crystal chandeliers, scattering prisms across the polished hardwood floor, and I let my eyes follow the light as it danced, tracing patterns that reflected the interactions of the guests, the nuances in every glance, every whispered word, every carefully measured smile. I thought of the countless family gatherings I had orchestrated over the years, the hours spent arranging flowers, folding napkins, preparing tables, and ensuring that each detail conveyed warmth, thoughtfulness, and care, a devotion that had gone largely unrecognized yet remained a quiet source of pride. The laughter of children playing nearby rose and fell like a gentle tide, and I allowed it to wash over me, anchoring me in the room, reminding me of the joy that could coexist with tension. Victoria leaned toward one of the younger relatives, whispering something with a sly smile, unaware that my awareness cataloged each syllable, each movement, each micro-expression, and I noted the way the corners of her mouth twitched, the subtle lift of her eyebrows, the brief hesitation before she returned to her composed demeanor. My hands rested lightly on the edge of my chair, tracing the texture of the fabric, grounding me in the calm center of the space while my mind mapped the dynamics around me, each observation building a clear picture of intent and consequence. The piano music played softly in the background, notes rising and falling, punctuating the moments of conversation and silence, and I let the sound enhance my perception, linking it to gestures and expressions, building a comprehensive sense of awareness. I straightened my back, shoulders relaxed but poised, presence quiet yet undeniable, and I recognized the power in this patience, in the quiet accumulation of knowledge and perception that would guide my next steps. Every small gesture, every subtle exchange, Every glance that passed unnoticed by others was noted and held in my mind, each a potential lever for the moment when discretion and timing would reveal truths otherwise hidden. I leaned slightly forward, inhaling the soft scent of roses mingled with the sweet aroma of desserts on the tables, letting it sharpen my focus, reinforcing the deliberate calm that defined my presence, preparing me for the quiet, measured actions that could transform observation into insight and insight into subtle, controlled revelation. I felt a subtle shift in the energy around the table as I continued to observe, the soft laughter and conversation carrying undercurrents that only an attentive eye could discern. The floral arrangements reflected the soft chandelier light, creating a kaleidoscope of color on the polished hardwood, and I let my gaze follow these reflections, anchoring myself in the beauty of the moment while my mind catalogued every interaction. Victoria moved with calculated grace, offering polite smiles and measured nods, oblivious to the awareness I maintained, each gesture logged, each expression analyzed. I recalled the countless hours I had spent planning events like this, arranging every place setting, ensuring that every napkin fold, every polished piece of silverware, conveyed care and attention, and I recognized the quiet power that came from being fully present while others assumed control. My hands rested lightly on the edge of my chair, fingers tracing the intricate embroidery of the tablecloth, a subtle tactile anchor as I considered the unfolding dynamics. The soft strains of the piano continued in the background, notes floating across the room, intertwining with the hum of conversations, and I allowed them to sharpen my focus, heightening my perception of subtle cues and whispered exchanges. A brief glance between Victoria and one of the bridesmaids caught my attention, a flicker of amusement in her eyes, and I noted the micro-expression, cataloging it silently without any outward reaction, understanding its significance while preserving the calm I projected. I adjusted my posture slightly, drawing strength from the steady rhythm of my breathing, the quiet awareness that patience and observation offered more advantage than immediate confrontation ever could. The table gleamed in the ambient light, the reflection of crystal and silver catching my eye as I let my attention sweep over the arrangement, every small detail reinforcing the broader pattern I had been piecing together over the course of the evening. Children ran briefly past, laughter ringing through the space, and I allowed the innocence of their joy to settle the tension within me, keeping my mind clear and measured, ready for the subtle, deliberate steps I would take to reveal truths without spectacle. Every interaction, every whispered word, every carefully measured smile was stored in my memory, a record of intent and pretense, and I allowed the knowledge to settle, quietly preparing the groundwork for the moment when observation would translate into gentle but undeniable action, leaving the room charged with a silent anticipation that only the patient and perceptive could command. I felt the subtle currents of the room shift as the afternoon wore on, the laughter and chatter continuing on the surface while underneath, the tension thickened like a slow-moving tide. The soft light filtering through the windows painted the edges of the crystal centerpieces, highlighting every delicate facet, and I allowed my eyes to trace these glints, noticing how they reflected the small gestures and expressions of the guests. Victoria passed by once more, her smile measured and composed, but there was a flicker of something unguarded in her eyes, a brief hint that she had not accounted for the depth of my awareness. I adjusted my hands on the table, fingers tracing the embroidery on the linen, a small motion that anchored me, grounding my attention while the room moved around me. I remembered the countless times I had orchestrated family gatherings, every napkin folded, every flower arranged with care, every detail chosen to foster warmth and connection, and I let this memory reinforce the quiet authority that came from experience and patience. I observed the subtle interactions between Victoria and her friends, the micro-expressions that betrayed amusement or judgment, and I cataloged them silently, understanding their significance without needing to intervene. The piano played a gentle, steady melody in the background, its notes rising and falling, a subtle rhythm that allowed me to measure the tempo of the room and anticipate the flow of conversation and movement. My posture remained composed, back straight, shoulders relaxed but alert, a presence that drew notice without demanding it, the calm center around which the rest of the room orbited unknowingly. The children's laughter rippled through the hall, a reminder of innocence and joy amidst the subtle undercurrents, and I allowed it to wash over me, keeping my focus sharp while my mind organized each observation into a coherent understanding of the situation. I felt the weight of the envelope in my coat pocket, a quiet promise of action to come, its contents potent yet unseen, a symbol of the leverage that patience and careful observation could provide. Every glance, every whisper, every slight change in expression was noted and held in my memory, each a potential key to the unfolding sequence of revelation. I breathed steadily, feeling the calm clarity of being fully present, fully aware, ready for the deliberate, subtle steps that would allow observation to become insight and insight to become action. The room poised on the edge of recognition and consequence, with the next moment suspended in quiet anticipation. I felt the moment stretch as conversations swirled around me, the gentle hum of chatter and laughter creating a backdrop to the subtle game unfolding at my table. The light from the chandeliers caught the edges of the glassware, refracting into tiny rainbows that danced across the polished surface, and I let my gaze follow them, noting how they mirrored the delicate interactions of the guests. Victoria moved with practiced elegance, offering smiles and nods, her gestures precise and deliberate, unaware that my awareness cataloged every nuance, every subtle shift in posture, every fleeting expression. I rested my hands lightly on the table, feeling the cool texture of the linen beneath my fingers, grounding myself as my mind stitched together the mosaic of intentions and behaviors that had accumulated over the course of the afternoon. Memories of past family gatherings surfaced, the warmth of my care and attention in arranging flowers, preparing desserts, and organizing seating plans, each moment a silent testament to dedication that had gone largely unnoticed. I observed the exchange between Victoria and her companions, the quiet whispers, the slight lift of an eyebrow, the carefully timed laugh, and I internalized it all, recognizing the pattern of control and pretense that ran through her actions. The piano played softly, the notes floating above the room, punctuating the movements of the guests with a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with my own perception, heightening my awareness of the subtleties around me. I adjusted my posture, straightening my back and lifting my chin, projecting a composed presence that demanded attention without assertion, a calm authority that contrasted with the flurry of gestures and murmurs surrounding me. I allowed a faint smile to cross my lips, barely perceptible, an internal acknowledgement that I had seen, remembered, and understood every layer of the evening. The children's laughter carried across the hall, a gentle reminder of innocence and joy amidst subtle manipulation, grounding my focus while allowing me to catalog every clue for the moment when quiet observation would translate into deliberate, calculated action. I traced the rim of my glass with my finger, each rotation reinforcing my composure and heightening my attention to the micro details. A glance that lingered too long, a hesitant gesture, the slight stiffening of a shoulder. The envelope in my pocket remained a silent promise, its potential unspoken yet potent, a reminder that patience and discretion held more power than any immediate confrontation could. Every word, every gesture, every nuance was etched into my memory, creating a precise understanding of the room and its occupants, preparing me to move with intention when the moment was right, leaving the air thick with anticipation and unspoken possibility, as though the space itself was aware that a quiet revelation was imminent. I held the envelope lightly in my hand, the weight of it grounding me as I observed the final moments of the reception. Victoria moved past, unaware that every motion, every expression, and every glance she shared was cataloged in my mind, a silent record of the evening that would speak volumes later. The soft light of the chandeliers reflected off the polished tables, casting intricate patterns across the floor, and I let my gaze follow them, tracing each reflection, each shadow, seeing what others failed to notice. I remembered the countless family events I had meticulously prepared, the attention to every detail, every flower, every place setting, and the hours spent ensuring each guest felt welcomed, now contrasted sharply with the subtle disregard I witnessed tonight. A brief murmur between Victoria and another guest caught my attention, a whispered comment laced with amusement and assumption, and I cataloged it silently, knowing the meaning of every nuance while keeping my demeanor calm and composed. The laughter of children playing at the far end of the hall carried softly, a gentle reminder of innocence amidst the undercurrents of strategy and pretense. I adjusted my shawl slightly, feeling the smooth fabric beneath my fingers, a deliberate gesture that grounded me while my mind analyzed the intricate dynamics at play. The faint strains of the piano continued to thread through the room, providing rhythm to the subtle exchanges I observed, each note allowing me to pace my attention and deepen my understanding of the intentions around me. My posture remained poised, shoulders relaxed, head held high, a presence that was quietly commanding without overt display, a calm center in the midst of polite chatter and hidden agendas. I traced the rim of my glass with a finger, noting the light touch, a minor movement that reinforced my patience and observation, preparing me for the eventual moment when discretion would transform into quiet, controlled revelation. Every smile, every tilt of a head, every subtle gesture was stored carefully, forming a complete picture of the social currents and the intentions woven throughout the room. The anticipation in the air was palpable, though unspoken, as I maintained my composure, the envelope a silent promise of insight, understanding, and potential revelation. I leaned back slightly, allowing my eyes to follow Victoria one last time, noting the flicker of uncertainty that passed across her features, the first hint that her perception of control had been misjudged, and I remained calm, steady, and patient, knowing that the careful observation, the quiet awareness, and the deliberate restraint of the evening would culminate in a subtle, yet undeniable, turning of the tables, leaving the room suspended in a delicate balance of suspense and expectation.